Hello, everybody. Justin here, and welcome to my top 10 favorite keyboards I've ever played. So, this is the positive list. We did the negative list a couple of days ago, and I need to take a drink after that. um, there were a couple of things that I've forgotten to mention on the honorable mentions um, from that list, but that was 2 days ago. This is now, so now we get to focus on the stuff that I like. um, so I tried to keep a variety of different brands on this list. You will see a couple of the brands show up twice, maybe three times. I'm not sure. I haven't really counted how many times a certain brand shows up, but out of maybe the 20 plus, maybe 30 plus years that I've been playing keyboards, um, and the instruments that I've had access to, or instruments that I've gotten to try out at a music store, like in person and spend some serious time with, these are going to be my 10 favorites. And I'll talk about why. Um, there'll be a good variety of different things on here on this list. So, why don't we kick it off with number 10? Number 10 is the Korg Poly 6 from 1981. So, um, this was Korg's answer to, say, the Prophet 5, where you had a synthesizer that you could finally store presets through a microprocessor. So, digitally store presets. Um, the Poly 6 had four banks of eight for a total of 32. It had a tape interface where you could load and save your patches externally. It was a single oscillator, six voice polysynth. And remember what I talked about in the last video about what a polysynth is versus a monosynth like the 2600. A monosynth only allows for one note at a time, like the Mini Moog. A polysynth allows you to play multiple notes at a time. Um, in this case, six. Um, so you had one oscillator with a sub oscillator as well. So when you flip that switch, you can get an octave down or two octaves down, and really thicken up the sound. It had a nice filter in it. It had probably the signature thing of the Poly 6 would be the effects section, especially the ensemble effect. You could get really beautiful string sounds and pad sounds out of it. Um, the thing to beware about it is the battery is a type of rechargeable battery, and over time, if it wasn't caught in time, it would leak all over the main board, and you could pretty much kiss your Poly 6 goodbye, unless you could take it someplace and get a new main board installed. Good luck finding one. There are third party options out there, as well as MIDI upgrades, but the reason I picked this at number 10 is this really. My stepdad had a Poly 6. He's a keyboard player. He played in a bunch of bands. I know when in like the 70s and 80s, but I remember when I was growing up, he was in a very popular function band in the area, and this was one of the keyboards he had was the Poly 6. And I remember the first time that he showed me how to make sounds on it, and it really blew open the doors for me. It was the first instrument that got to lay hands on where, oh, I'm not stuck with presets like say on a portable keyboard like a Yamaha PSR, or a Portasound, where what you hear is what you get. Now, oh, I can make the sound brighter. I can make the sound darker. I can make the volume kind of sound like a piano where you have a sharp attack and then it, fades out. Um, I can make my own sounds. So for that reason, um, for the reason that it really blew open the doors is to what I could do with a synthesizer and being able to make my own sounds. I'm putting the Poly 6 at number 10. Now, if that's number 10, um, there's going to be a lot of stuff on this list that I really like. Number 9, the Roland V Combo VR760 from 2003. So this is the very first of Roland's V Combo line, the VR series. Because then you had the VR 700, the VR 09, the VR 09B, the VR 730, and now they have what they call the V stage. So it's really like a stage keyboard. So it's a step beyond the V combo. But the idea is, and I'll tell you why I picked this one, um, and the only reason I have it is for the organ section. But it's really designed to be an all in one stage keyboard where you have three sections, four if you count the very simple rhythm playback system. So, really just a basic drum machine. It has an organ section, it has a piano section, and it has a synth section. So, three playable sections. The synth section, you've got 18 basic sounds. I'd say they're half decent. There's a couple of okay, string sounds in there. There's like one good synth brass. But the beauty in the synth section is you can throw two SRX boards and really expand the palette of the synth section in the VR 760. The only drawback is the way that you browse the presets on there. Um, it's one of those instruments where I have to sit down and find which presets I like and then save them to the registrations. And I think it's 8 banks of 8 registrations. So I've got a total of 64. So I'll have to play around with mine and rearrange some things. But I'll tell you why I really like it. I really like the organ. Now think about this. This keyboard, all in one, was the Nord stage before the Nord stage even was a thought. Um, you could compare it to the Nord Electro, but the Nord Electro was even more specialized than the Roland, where the Electro was more focused on just the organ and the electric piano sounds, hence Electro. Um, the VR 760 has a beautiful, very, very playable waterfall action. It's really light to the touch, so when you're playing really fast stuff on an organ, it doesn't feel stiff. It doesn't feel like the key is, resisting you a little bit when you're playing it, especially when you hold a chord down. It doesn't feel like the key is pressing right up against your hands. It really feels like the keys, move right along with you. It's very, very fluid. Beautiful action. The even cooler thing, especially, and I think this is only applicable on the organ section, is there are two trigger points that you can set to trigger the organ. There's a um, there's a shallow trigger point and there's a deep trigger point. I keep it set up on the shallow. It just allows me to play, quicker. So it's adjustable to your playing style, you know. So big kudos to Roland um, for including that. The organ engine, it's um, honestly, I would say it does what I need it to do. It sounds decent to my ears. Is it the best Hammond organ emulation that I've heard in a hardware instrument? Not really, but it's close. Um, for me, that would have to go to the Hammond XK1C and possibly the XK5. So, so that range. Um, as far as I'm concerned, the red brand doesn't come close. Now, again, and I said this in the previous video, no disrespect to anybody that owns that particular brand and that likes that. It's just not for me. Um, But the organ engine in the VR 760 is very tweakable, very editable. There's a lot of things you can do, to adjust it. There's different tone wheel models. There's different amp simulations, for your Leslie Sim. And I've got it dialed into where I really, really like it and I can really play this instrument. Um, yeah. So the VR 760 is at number 9 for me. Number 8, and I've got it behind me, the Yamaha DX7 from 1983. Probably one of the most popular and one of the best selling keyboards of all time. Um, because now you have a synth that doesn't go out of tune. Because before this, you were dealing with, analog. This would have been the first really affordable synth to incorporate the frequency modulation or FM synthesis technology. Um, you would have had the Yamaha GS1 and GS2. Then you would have had the Synclavier. Those had very, very high price tags, especially the Synclavier. Um, that would probably cost you about as much as a house. But here we have a very affordable way to get into that technology. And dare I say, as cliche as a lot of these sounds are, I still really love it. I love that instrument. Um, it really is an instrument. I've gotten sounds out of it where I can really be expressive with some of the things that I want to be able to do with that. Now, I will say if you have a DX7, you will know that programming on it is a complete nightmare because you're dealing with a very, very small display. And unless you're very good at button pushing and menu diving and all that stuff, um, I highly recommend. There's a couple of different software emulations. The Arturia DX7V is okay. Um, there's a free one called DXed, which is spelled DEXED, but my recommendation costs you maybe around 50 US dollars, and that would be the Plogue, Plogue, OPS 7, because that will show you when you open it up and you look at the screen, it'll show you all of your operators and whatever algorithm you have. So I'll explain that really quick. What how the DX7 works is there's 6 oscillators. In Yamaha terms or in FM terms, they're called operators. Now the way FM works is you have, I'll just take 2 operators. One of them is called the carrier. That is your sound. That is the operator that you're going to hear. The other one is called the modulator. That is what's going to modulate or change the frequency of the carrier. Okay? And I could demonstrate this like on the 2600. Maybe I might do that in a video at some point. But there are a bunch of people that are very, very like beyond my abilities of FM programming. Um, but in this case, you have 6 operators, and you could have an algorithm, which is an arrangement of these operators. You could say, have one carrier branching out into, like, say, 3 different modulators, branching out again to, maybe a couple of those modulators have modulators too. So there's different ways you can set these operators up and get different sounds. As an example, if you have a DX7, take any sound, take maybe an electric piano sound, and just try changing the algorithm and see what kind of different sounds you can get out of it. But I will say there's a lot more to FM synthesis than people are familiar with. Um, if you go to my BandCamp site, and the link will be down in the video notes below the video description, listen to Retroactive and listen to a track called Forward Motion. All of those sounds, except for the drums, are done with a DX7. So that'll give you kind of an idea of how really versatile and expressive that instrument can be. So at number 8, and also it has a beautiful key bed. It's got one of the best synth action semi-weighted key beds that I've ever played in a keyboard. All right, so that's number 8. Number 7 is the Ensoniq TS10 from '93. I've had a few Ensoniq keyboards. Now, Ensoniq was a US company. I want to say their first project was the Mirage sampler. And if we thought that Emu was the kind of gateway into affordable sampling, you were still talking a few $1,000s, maybe at least six, seven, eight, $9,000 for one of their, instruments. But Ensoniq comes out with a sampler that I want to say is a couple grand, maybe less than that. Somebody would definitely correct me in the comments. But you finally had an affordable sampler, and in 1986, they released an instrument called the ESQ1, which was their first synthesizer. Now, you had basically a pretty flexible synth, but you also had a sequencer on it. You had, I want to say it was an 8 track sequencer. I can't remember because I don't have my ESQ1 anymore. I ended up having to sell it. Um, yeah, sadly, I had to let it go. Yeah, I miss it. But it was an easy to use sequencer. Um, I've gotten really nice, really good results from it. So, really, an all in one workstation was already born before the Korg M1, which had the label Music Workstation. So, if people think the M1 was the first workstation, a synthesizer with a sequencer in it, there have been others before that, the ESQ1 you know, being the main one, I think. I think. Um, that predated the M1. But the M1 was really, the thing that took off. But anyway, I digress. Ensoniq was really ahead of their time, as far as I'm, concerned, with a lot of their instruments. They were still, as of the SQ80, which was the follow up to the ESQ1, they were putting poly aftertouch key beds on their instruments. And if you watch my review on the Hydrasynth Deluxe, I explain a little bit, as well as the Yamaha Montage M8X. I explain what polyphonic aftertouch is. Um, but they were still doing that. Everyone else was doing mono aftertouch. But the TS10 comes out in '93. You're building on the VFX and the SD1. So now, not only do you have transwave sounds that were in the, wave transwaves that were in the VFX SD and the SD1. I had a VFX SD. That's why I call it that. You also had hyperwaves, so you had kind of a variation on wave sequencing that was introduced in the Korg wave station. And depending on which model you got and which expansions you got, you could hook up a SCSI drive to it. And I believe, I can't remember because it's been 18 years since I've had a TS10, and I've never done any of the sample like importing or anything like that. But you could import some samples off of CD-ROM, I believe. Don't quote me on that. Into a TS10, and then you have more waveforms. But it had a beautiful sound to it. It was very, very good at doing pads, as far as I was concerned. It had a beautiful sequencer like the ESQ1. Um, Very, very nice sequencer. Very nice keyboard action. Also had the poly aftertouch. This was an instrument that was ahead of its time. So, for those reasons, I'm putting the TS10 at number 7. Number 6, the Kurzweil K2000. I had the 2000 VP, which had the K2500 sound set in it, if I'm remembering right. But I got pad sounds and I got some kind of comping sounds out of this and a couple of very gorgeous lead sounds out of this instrument when I had one. Unfortunately, the effects engine ended up dying on it and I never got it fixed. Um, but the K2000 used a technology called VAST, Variable Architecture Synthesis technology. I think that's what the acronym is. But basically, you had building blocks and you could arrange them in many, many different ways. So, kind of like the DX7 had six operators and you can arrange them into algorithms. Vast would allow you to take different building blocks of a of a signal path of a synthesizer, and you could swap them out and do different things with them. And it, you could do stuff on that instrument that you probably couldn't even get away with on the Korg, on the competing Korg at the time, and that will be coming up shortly. Um, but I remember it having a very nice keyboard, mono aftertouch, but honestly, as long as it had some kind of aftertouch, I was happy. Um, it had a nice sequencer in it. It also had what Kurzweil calls quick access, which means I could take a program or a setup being Kurzweil speak of combination mode or performance mode on some keyboards where you can do your layers and splits of your different programs. Um, you could assign those to the 10 key keypad and they're just one click away. So you could basically have a sound on each of the 10 keys on the keypad, and then you can have different banks of those sounds. So Kurzweil really did a beautiful job of designing this instrument. So that is number six for me. Number five, the Korg 1W. If you read that upside down, it'll say M10. And that was and it's supposedly a rumor. I don't know if it's true, but I've read it like many, many places where the R&D team was developing the M10, and I guess somebody read the model name upside down and it spelled O1W. Oh, let's go with that. I don't know what Korg sometimes are thinking with their name, with how they name their synths, but and this is one of those mysteries of the universe. But nonetheless, this instrument also does beautiful pads, beautiful acoustic sounds, string sounds. I had a Pro X that I unfortunately had to get rid of. It was just too big and too heavy. Um, and I was trying to get the joystick fixed on it. The joystick snapped off like in transit from, I want to say, coming home from a gig one night, and the joystick snapped right off. And it took me years to find a replacement. I did. I found a 3D printed one, and it fit perfectly, with the exception of I couldn't get a spring for either one of the axes. And in this case, it would have been the I want to say it would have been the y-axis. Um, so that was a complete fail, and I was like, I can't sink any more money into fixing this instrument. I gotta let it go. But it had a very unique sound to it, and you'll find that as a theme with most of these keyboards. There's sounds coming from these instruments that you can't get anywhere else. More on that topic later. um, but I've always liked I like the acoustic sounds on it. I like the pad sounds. It had some technology in it, like it had wave shaping and things like that. It was very, very unique to that instrument. It had a big, lush sound to it. Um, if I had the opportunity to get another O1W, probably either the FD or the O1W Pro, the 76 note. I don't think I'd want a Pro X anymore. Too big. But yeah, I like this instrument a lot. So that's number five. Number four, and I wish I still had this one, Roland RD 1000 digital piano. If you know me, you know I'm an Elton John fan. Some people might not be. But you know what? That's fine. We all have different tastes. We all can't like, everything. The RD 1000 had a sound and it had a vibe to it. And a lot of gospel pianists still like the sounds of the RD 1000 or the module counterpart, which is the MKS 20. Um, Used a technology that Roland called SA synthesis, which is structure adaptive, I think is but it was a synthesis to create the sound of an acoustic piano or an electric piano or whatever else they had, harpsichord vibes. But it was all done in synthesis. And you know what? For the time, 1986, sounded pretty good. It sounded really close. It was probably the closest you could get, short of actually sampling an acoustic grand piano, which Kurzweil did in their very first instrument, the K250. And there's a whole story, with that, with how that was developed. Um, but I found this piano in Manchester in 2019, and me being an Elton John fanatic, go into this music store. I go into the back lot. They have two different buildings. The store I'm talking about is Manchester Music Mill. If you're in the area and you ever need anything, music equipment wise, go there. Best customer service, one of the best customer services, like in person that I've experienced. Like those guys really know what they're talking about. Their used their used equipment is very, very vast. You don't get a lot of that anymore, especially in this area now that one particular store chain has closed down, like, and has been closed for probably about 14 years, and it's kind of sad. But it's one of those stores where if you're looking for used stuff, you never know what you're going to find. And I hope that they continue on with that, because it's awesome. So anyway, walk into the store, into the back building. I see a couple digital pianos. One of them is a Casio that I couldn't care any less about, but it was sitting on top of a Roland, and the Roland was an RD 1000. I immediately started fanning, like, put my hands on it. It was plugged in, beautiful. I start playing it. Had a $400 price tag on it, and the sales guy, could see that I was really getting into it. It's like 400. It's tempting. Um, he let me have it for 275 with a flight case. Um, you could tell he really wanted it out of there because as soon as we got it into my friend's car, he says under his breath, "I never want to see this piano again." And I was thinking, "Don't worry, you won't." And he didn't. Unfortunately, it died in December of 2023. The audio finally ended up going out on it. Um, I think it was the right channel that went out on it, so I couldn't get that beautiful stereo chorus that it has on it. But the bigger thing for me was the action was second to none. It felt really, really light under my hands. I felt like I could really play it. Um, as dated as it sounded, I felt like I wasn't fighting the instrument when I played it. I felt like we kind of complemented each other beautifully. Um, the key bed was a real wooden key bed, and if you look at the size of an RD 1000, the keys go from the front all the way to the back of the instrument. It's literally, when you talk about a balanced weighted action, it literally is a balanced action. It's balancing on top of a rail. Um, so this is a weighted action. There's no hammers in it, so it's not a hammer action. But it was beautiful. Um, there's only one other instrument that comes even close to the way that the RD 1000 felt under my hands. We'll talk about that one later. Um, and you'll hear me talking a lot about my carpal tunnel issues that I had years ago. It was when I put my hands on this instrument that, oh, okay, I have a weighted key bed, 88 weighted, that I could play. That I didn't feel fatigued after 5 minutes of playing it. So for the playability and the vibe that it gave off with the way it sounded, um, and the fact that one of my piano playing heroes used one for a few years, the RD 1000 is at number 4. Number 3, the ASM Hydrosynth, specifically the deluxe version that came out in 2021. The Hydrosynth came out in 2019, and you had a synthesizer that was offering, excuse me, you had a synthesizer that was offering things that not a lot, I don't think any other keyboard, as far as I can remember, was offering as far as performance features. Poly Aftertouch, a very generous ribbon controller that I think the only other maybe instrument in the league was the Polybrute. The Arturia Polybrute, but I can't remember when that came out. Maybe that came out after. I can't remember. Don't quote me on that. But in addition to those, you had basically a synthesizer that could be a wavetable synth. It could be a transwave synth. It's a very versatile instrument. Like, if you watch my review of it, I could kind of get into D50 territory with some of the sounds that I could get out of it. It has a very playable action. You know, nice and light to the touch, but not. It doesn't feel cheap like a lot of other, you know, lesser priced instruments go. um, those I've talked about in my other list. But it was very playable. It's built like a tank. I have the deluxe version, which is what I'm talking about here, which is two Hydrosynth engines in one. And it's got two playing modes. You have single mode, which gives you the two engines are kind of connected into one, where you've got 16 voices across the entire keyboard. When you put it into multi mode, you are layering the two engines for some 8 voice sounds, which still, honestly, is totally fine for the things that I use it for. I find I can get very expressive lead sounds out of it. I find I can get, very playable brass sounds, pad sounds. I mean, versatility is the name of the game here. You're not going to find sample playback stuff like your pianos, guitars, things like that. That's not what this instrument is for. This instrument is a synthesizer at heart, and a very programmable one, and a very intuitive one at that. The user experience is beautiful. I kind of wish the fonts on the displays and even the displays were a little bit bigger, so somebody with 2070 vision, 2050 with these glasses could read them, a little bit easier. Um, but as far as the way it's laid out and the way you can program the sounds on it, um, absolutely beautiful. So for those reasons, the playability, the programmability, the durability, other than one little minor issue with one of the key weights, the Hydrosynth Deluxe is number 3, and I still have it. Number 2 is only number 2 because of my number 1. If it wasn't for my number 1, this would be my number 1, and I have 2 of them behind me. The Alesis Quadrasynth. I have a original Quadrasynth, and I have a Quadrasynth Plus piano. Why is this number 2? Imagine me. I could play when I was 9, 8 or 9. I knew what sound sounded like. I knew what a piano sounded like. I knew what a guitar sounded like. Um, my 9-year-old ears. I mean, I remember going to. I'll tell you the story, but I've never heard anything like this instrument. Um, If I remember correctly, I've played. I got to try out a Korg digital piano, like a digital home piano. I think it was like the Concert 3500. I think it was one of the Korg digital pianos. I tried out a Roland RD 500. Um, but then I saw this. One of the sales guys was showing this off. It had just come out. Um, and I put the headphones on. He was playing some of the sounds. I'll tell you what, my 9 year old self kind of knew a little bit about sound, but I never heard anything like this instrument. And he showed me how to, take the first quad knob and scroll through the sounds. Um, and as I'm scrolling through, my ears kept going, ooh, next sound, ooh, next sound, ooh. Um, love at first sound. There's the saying love at first sight, but for me it was love at first sound. And I kind of had it in the back of my mind that I was going to get one. This is actually the third and the fourth quadrant that I've owned. The last two that I've had issues with the screen going really buggy on me. Um, Started showing random characters. At one point, like half the screen went out. I couldn't fix either one of them, and you can't really use these instruments without either of the screens. So unfortunately, I had to part those two out. I had to let them go. Um, but I knew I still wanted to have one. It was just a matter of time. So I found the original Quadrasynth in New Jersey at a place called Three Wave Music. If you're ever in Midland Park, go check that store out. They have anything and everything keyboard related. If you're looking for vintage stuff, if you're looking for more modern stuff, they'll let you try out anything you want. I got to try out a Rev 3 Prophet 5. You're talking maybe about a $7,000 synth. I was in heaven for about maybe the couple of minutes that I was playing around with it, as I was with a friend of mine and I didn't want him to feel left out. I'm like, I'm not ignoring you. I'm kind of in heaven right now. Not real, not literally. No, that's going to be happening much later. But anyway, I asked him, randomly, say, hey, do you have a quadrasynth by any chance? And I was kind of in the position to get one. So I played this one. It's got a couple issues. The aftertouch strip doesn't work, which is fine because I can MIDI control it. The pitch bend wheel um, is a little wonky to the point where I've just disconnected it, so I don't use the pitch wheel on it. But in any event, I have the Quadrasynth Plus piano. But anyway, so got that one, and then maybe about a month later, I found a very good deal on the follow up, which is the Quadrasynth Plus piano. And that expands the sound memory. It does a couple things to the interface where the quad knobs are now real time controls. But I will say this, if there ever was an instrument that was going to be labeled a pad machine, the Quadrasynth would be it. Case closed. That's it. um, if I could get a third one, I would. That's how much I love that instrument. But like I said, the only reason it's number two is because my number one, Yamaha Montage M8X from 2023. Now, I had already liked the Montage. I had a Modi X7, and I talked a lot about that experience in the previous video. Loved the sound, hated the key bed, hated the build quality. So my church has a Montage M8X that I play it every week. Sometimes if I need to do some extra programming on it, or if I get inspired where I need to bring it up here for some reason, then I won't have a problem hauling it up 2 flights of stairs to program it and to play with it and to really kind of just get inspired by it. But when you talk about a keyboard that is extremely versatile in the sounds that it can make, so the M8X, the Montage M series in general, if you take the M8X, the fact that it's 88 balanced hammer action, beautiful key bed, second only to my RD1000. I just wish the key bed was a little bit, the tiniest bit lighter and a little bit faster. Um, but other than that, it's a beautiful action. I don't get fatigued when playing it. But can I just talk about the way it sounds? You have three engines. You have the AWM2 engine, which was massively upgraded from the Montage and the original Modi X, as well as the Modi X Plus. There are tons of YouTube videos as well as my own um, videos on the Montage M. So you have that. You have an 8 operator FM engine called FMX, which means I can get all the DX7 sounds. I just like having a Mark 1 DX7. So whatever. You also have the ANX engine, which gives you virtual analog sounds. So you have those three engines combined, give you 400 voices of polyphony. So you're not really going to run out of polyphony there. You might run out on the ANX engine because you've only got 16 voices there, but you're not really going to run out of sound possibilities. And then take into the fact that you can import your own samples as WAV files into the flash memory of the Montage, and you've got your own sample playback instrument. So record a sample into whatever DAW you want, put it on a flash drive, make sure the flash drive is formatted to FAT32, which is what the Montage reads. Stick the flash drive in, load your sound into flash memory, map it out wherever you want it on the key bed, and there it is. I've triggered background vocals, I've triggered all kinds of different things using that. Also, the smooth sound, what Yamaha calls the seamless sound switching, which basically means here's my piano sound, here's my like synth brass sound. I can seamlessly go from the piano to the brass sound without the sound cutting out, without the effects cutting out. You'd never know I changed the sound. It's not the way I play live. I don't like changing presets in the middle of a song, but for those where that's extremely important, yeah, this as far as I'm concerned is the best version of this feature that I've seen in any keyboard. Um, it's got a beautiful control surface with a subscreen, with a second screen, which shows you what's going on with the control knobs. And, you can even do some quick edits over on the subscreen while you're on your main performance page. And if you need to go into detail, you could just hit a jump button and it'll jump whatever's on that subscreen onto the main screen for even deeper editing. Um, Yamaha really thought this one through. Minor little constructive critique here. I wish they would have included an organ engine like in the YC series. If they put that in there, there's nothing you can't do with the Montage M. If that had an organ engine in it instead of using the AWM, this keyboard would be the be all end all of instruments. And as far as, dollars per features at $4,500, this is probably the best value for the dollar feature wise that you're going to get in any keyboard. Hands down. That's my opinion, but hands down. So the versatility of the sounds that it can create, the beautiful key bed, the user interface, the fact that it's just so inspiring to play. Like I said, if this wasn't my number one, the Quadrasynth would be. But Yamaha Montage M8X is my number one. So to recap, number one, my top 10 favorite keyboards I've ever played. To recap, the Korg Poly 6 at number 10, the Roland V Combo VR760 at number 9, the Yamaha DX7 at number 8, the Ensoniq TS10 at number 7, the Kurzweil K2000 at number 6, the Korg 01W at number 5, the Roland RD1000 digital piano from 1986 at number 4, the ASM Hydrosynth Deluxe at number 3, and I will also say that their customer support is top notch. I love ASM for that. The Alesis Quadrasynth at number 2, which would be my number 1 if it wasn't for the Yamaha Montage M8X. So those are my top 10 most favorite keyboards I've ever played. If you like this video and you want to see more, click the subscribe button and click the notification icon. You'll get notified every time I upload a video or when I go live for a live stream, whether it be a review or just hanging out in the studio working on music or whatever. If you'd like to check out my music, please go to my BandCamp page, and the link for that will be in the video notes below the video. And if you like what you hear there, I encourage you to support my music by making a purchase. And I say that for pretty much any artist. If you support any artist, if you really, really like them, please support them by purchasing their music. It really helps out in more ways than you could imagine. But anyway, that's going to do it for this video. Thank you everybody for watching, and we'll see you next time.